What is up, folks? This is Addy Ads. This is Public Intelligence, and we have a former guest we've had on a few times, not in some time, though, for several months now. Really looking forward to this. I know people love it when I meet up with Major Jeffrey Prather, retired Special Operations soldier, former DIA intelligence collector, an ex-DEA special agent, targeted by the deep state turned whistleblower. Now you're an intelligence officer exposing fake news. He is an author, speaker, martial arts master, TV and film actor, firearms instructor, and chaplain. Again, he served with the Special Forces, Chief of Global Operations for the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and was a special agent for the Drug Enforcement Administration and a whistleblower on Operation Fast and Furious, which is kind of a mainstay in anyone who's investigated DEA U.S. government malfeasance in the theater of the world drug war in Mexico. So we can definitely cover that today and everything that's happened over the past few months since we last spoke. Major Prather, really always honored to speak with you. Glad to see your health is back. We can talk about that as well, and I can talk about my recent, bout of something which we can get into. But thanks for coming on the show again, sir. Really appreciate you.
No, great to be back with you.
Excellent. And you as I mentioned, you did get the COOF. What was that like, and how long were you out of action? And I don't even want to say out of action because I saw your episode where you were on oxygen and you're still doing your intelligence briefings. I was like, man, this guy's a machine. You can't stop him.
I am hard to stop. Yes. I went down to Clay Clark's Freedom and Health in Texas, and had a great time there. There was about 4,000 or 5,000. Got several standing ovations for my talk there, and got to see Mike Adams and others, and that's where I got it. So that was in November, and I'm just about better now. But it was a little rough because I'm older now, and I've got lots of wear and tear on me. I like to say I've been rode hard and put away wet by the government, but much better than when the DEA was coming after me in 2009. Like we were talking before we went on, when they had moved me to New York, but I went back to Tucson to get second shoulder surgery, shoulder replacement. And I got real sick, and I was hospitalized for 2 weeks and had a fever for 3. And it gave me some penicillin type medicine, and basically were trying to kill me. That was a lot rougher. So this time, my wife takes great care of me, and I had Team America medical doctors and nurses showing up and calling my wife and showing up on the doorstep and leaving stuff. And of course, we already had all the protocols and stuff. So it wasn't that bad. That's certainly not going to stop me. So, and I just got tons of calls and emails and cards, and it was just really overwhelming.
That's great, sir. Just out of curiosity, for those that may not know, what was your protocol?
Well, it's the same stuff that I publish on my Patreon, and that's the ivermectin, hydrochloroquine. I went on steroids as well, and again, that's because I've got 2 shoulder surgeries, shoulder replacement, hip replacement, ulnar nerve surgery replacement. Hundreds of scars, part of my lungs gone. Dysentery, malaria, all that stuff. So, that with zinc and everything else. And, I was doing that beforehand as well. We certainly did that before we went to San Antonio, but just, up that a bit. And now I'm just about back to normal. My dojo kept going. I have assistant instructors. My handgun martial arts class kept going. I rode the other day, so ready to get back into it, and had the oxygen going, but it wasn't that bad.
Okay, excellent. And his website, Major Prather's website, is in the show notes if people want to check out his Patreon, which was mentioned before. I didn't know you had some shoulder replacements. What was the cause of that injury? You didn't play football or something like that, did you?
No, I was afraid to play football, so that's why my dad took me to a martial arts dojo when I was 10, and that changed everything because I've been in martial arts since 1967. The shoulder, oh gosh, what's it from? I don't know. It's from lots of stuff. Running with a rucksack, parachute landings, hard landings. Broke. That's another thing. Broken ankle on St. Mary Glease drop zone at Fort Bragg. Got up and walked away on that years ago. So it just went bad. I'm an old guy now, and lots of wear and tear. But
Sure.
doing good.
And you mentioned the being here, working in Manhattan, and you didn't like it. And back when the DEA was going after you, did you say that you did have to enter? That was part of this district, the SDNY and Thurgood Marshall Courthouse.
Oh yeah, I had to go down there. Yeah, they moved me. So when when I inadvertently became a whistleblower initially when I was on active duty at the DIA back in 03, 04 for the second Gulf War, my informant was hung out to dry, and he was suing the then head of DEA, the administrator, Michelle Leonhardt. And I went over from the Pentagon, where I had a team, to the DEA headquarters, which is right across the street, DEA and U.S. Marshals headquarters, and said, no, I can't do that. Here's the paperwork. I paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the State Department $5 million reward that he wanted for the extradition of Miguel Caro Quintero, brother of Rafael, who tortured and murdered our agent Kiki Camarena, is a separate deal. But I said, Leonhardt has destroyed my case because she made me pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars at once, as opposed to I just wanted to give him 10 grand every month, so I'd have control of him, so that he would come out of hiding to testify and everything. It's how you control informants. And she and her predecessor, Karen Tandy, who had also been the previous DEA administrator, and both of them had come from the Department of Justice as attorneys, had in tandem destroyed my extradition case. And that's how I initially became a whistleblower, because as soon as I said that at headquarters, I'm sure as soon as I left, the guy in charge of informants went up and told her, and then they started investigating me, and they came after me basically the same way they came after Trump and Flynn and all that. And eventually they moved me to New York from Tucson with 2 weeks notice and away from my kids. And that's where they put everybody that they're going to get rid of, because that's the most corrupt, as you know, that's the most corrupt federal district. And that's where all the Trump cases are going as well. So plus I'm a country guy, I like horses and getting out, and, I hated being in the city.
Sure. Yeah. Lots to touch on there, sir. I want to compare the trial I'm covering, the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, to actually a January 6th defendant trial. I believe the last name is Cleveland, Meredith Cleveland, or Meredith Grover Cleveland, believe it or not, is the name. And they have a call-in line for that trial, same district, but no call-in line for the trial for Ghislaine Maxwell. But that's a whole another show, kind of the shroud of secrecy that this trial has largely been conducted under. And you mentioned Caro Quintero. That was that Rafael or Miguel? Pardon me.
Well, I was extraditing Miguel, but he's the brother to Rafael. It's generally thought that they were there at the same time doing that. But the whole point was that was going to be the first extradition of a Sinaloa Mexican trafficker. And the Mexican cartels had taken over for the Colombian cartels, because before that they were transshippers, but they realized they could control everything. So they became like the previous Colombian cartel. So that was a sea change, that they would have been vulnerable. And so they didn't want that to happen. It turned out, for those who don't know, is that, I was right, is the DEA did have a deal with the Sinaloa cartel to run drugs north in exchange for the Fast and Furious guns going to them, going south. And that came out in the federal trial, where DEA agents raised their hand under oath and said that they did have a deal with the Sinaloa cartel. The same time frame, 04 to 09, when they were going after me. Yeah,
and that relationship between the Sinaloan cartel and the United States government continues to this day, with Omayo still being in power, half a century in the drug trade. Really amazing story. And I believe, to my knowledge, both Quinteros are operating now. I don't know if you saw that Rafael was let
Yep.
out at midnight, I believe, on a paperwork error, and
Yep.
he still has sicarios and cartel members loyal to him. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, it's all legal. Before it was less prevalent and overt, and under Trump he was fighting it and did a good job of it. But now they're just letting the drug traffickers and the child traffickers and the sex traffickers run wild. Totally,
Yeah.
it's really really bad. I wouldn't go down there. The Sicario, by the way, the what is it? Sicario Día del Soldado, the second movie, I thought was a very realistic portrayal of covert operations. The first one I didn't like. The second one was very good. I thought, if you want to
Okay.
see covert operations, and another one I really like is for realism of covert operations is Ronin, and also with Val Kilmer, who was going to be in my book, my movie Chase, Spartan. Those are three good if you want to see realistic covert operations portrayed.
Awesome. Thanks for those recommendations, sir. Because I have seen the Netflix El Chapo, which was pretty good, and I did see the first Sicario movie, but I haven't seen the second one yet. So that's good to know the second one is better, because usually that's not the case. But just looking at past episodes that you've done, talking about obviously the sixth. You really touch on a lot of stuff: the economy, the status of the FBI. And talked about the Kenosha kid as well. But anything you want to touch on? I also wanted to ask on the word algorithmatage too, because I kind of wanted this to be a 2021 year in review show. Lots going on this year. Obviously, Afghanistan was a waypoint, a deep state waypoint, shall we say? The Rittenhouse trial, a lot of big trials going on too as well this year. But yeah, anywhere you want to take it, Major Prather.
Well, since you're there, I'd like to touch on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and so I'm not paying a lot of attention to that because that is totally staged and theatrical, and the reason it is because I believe Ghislaine was the case officer or tactical agent handler for Epstein. And that fits along with, most people don't think that, but if you look at the radicalized Muslim Americans that go over to the Middle East and get a bride, and then they come back and do mass killing, mass shooting, that's their handler that comes back. That's the same thing that happened with Lieber at Harvard. He had a People's Liberation Army from China, second lieutenant military intelligence, working for him. She was his handler. She was the only one charged with espionage, and that's because FBI and Border Patrol and ICE let her go back out of the country. So the pattern now is female case officer. Well, it's not really new. Sparrows, the Avenger thing. That's really what that's about. Fung Fung with Swalwell and the Georgia governor, all of that. So Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was French Foreign Legion, and before that, I think he had to flee from some European country.
He's originally from, I think he's Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, and the Czechs, real smart, brave folks, had to flee, joined the French Foreign Legion, ended up as a British captain, I think, and then in the Foreign Office, which means he was a spy, and then mysteriously killed on his boat. And she changes, her hair and everything, and she was probably recruited there by Mossad. There's ex-Mossad guy, Ben Menash or something, that says that is the case. And so my take on that is she was running him. He was kind of a goof, an evil goof, pedophile. But so I don't see anything really coming out of this. And then Comey, Mueller and Comey are attached to the trial. They have, what is it, Mueller's, you'd know, is it Comey or Mueller's daughter?
That's Maureen Comey.
Comey.
Yeah.
So
one of the lead prosecutors.
So that the whole thing's a setup, and I don't know. I don't think anything's going to come of that. It's just, that's like Durham, not paying any attention to that, but not to. I think it's great that you're covering it, but I just think it's totally staged.
I agree.
But it's a great example of fifth generational warfare. Is all this is behind the scenes, and all this is staged.
Yeah, that's well said, sir. I tried not to have a preconceived decision or assessment of the trial before it even started, but even just looking at the scope of it before we got to proceedings, it's very limited witnesses, very limited evidence, which we saw. But just the fact that they pushed it back, and around the end of the year too, it's like the most difficult time of the year for people to have free time in many ways because of the holidays. So it kind of seems like they were trying to, rush it, get it done, tie it up with a bow at the end of the year before, people in mass started paying attention, which, the mainstream has done a very mediocre effort, I would say at best, covering this trial. And people compare that to the Rittenhouse trial, which, I think it must be said that in federal trials, which this is, there's no cameras allowed in the courtroom, which I think is another debate in itself. So that's why I think partially there's not as much coverage. But even if there wasn't, or if there was cameras allowed, it doesn't seem like there's just as many people here as there was for the Rittenhouse trial. But as I mentioned, very limited scope. Maureen Comey, that was another red flag from the get-go. Why is she got both, arguably both, two of the biggest conspiracy cases ever. And, she was the one who explained away the footage that disappeared from the correctional facility in which Epstein was suicided. And now she's a part of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial as well. People kind of seeing her being a part of this as a way to beef up her resume or CV for a possible gubernatorial run in the future. And that combined with the fact they've been very hermetic. I've only seen them once this whole time enter into the courtroom itself. And then you have, a promotion kind of being dangled, which it's going through in front of the Judge Nathan, going to the Second Circuit. Which is, I believe, one level short of the Supreme Court. And, Biden obviously going for his identitarian agenda. Judge Nathan is openly lesbian. And, that kind of fits the bill for Biden in many ways. But yeah, I agree, sir. It's even the charges, the government of the United States always overcharges, and I would say overconvicts. And she definitely got undercharged. No sex crimes whatsoever. 3 conspiracy charges, and then some enticement charges, and then transportation, enticement to transport a minor for illegal purposes, and then 2 perjury charges, which got severed and will be tried separately. But really bizarre, no sex crime charges at all, not even battery. And several have testified to being basically molested by Maxwell. So it's all very fishy. I will say I have no problem saying that now. It's it took active effort to remain as neutral as possible, given how much I know about this family and this greater Epstein Maxwell network. But I'm not surprised that your case was brought here and in the Southern District of New York. It seems like
I was never even charged. I mean, they tried to, but they couldn't. They lied and they coached witnesses. And they changed reports, but they didn't even charge me. They just fired me 1 year from retirement without ever giving me a bad evaluation. Both my New York supervisors and my Tucson supervisors gave me outstanding evaluations, but I was never charged. I've never been convicted of anything. But that's what they do. But in the Maxwell case, they built a tennis court over the graves. They raised, I believe, the temple. And what was the other thing I was going to say about that? I forget now. They're basically, if you follow my line of reasoning, that she was the the case officer for him, their networks got blown. So the FBI finally goes to the island, and there's submarine pens nearby for movement. You can move drugs by submarine. You can also move children and people by submarine as well. So those networks were getting blown. So they're covering all that up. Building tennis courts over it. The FBI goes in. No evidence shows up. The FBI lost the evidence because the FBI has just become the covert cleanup team for FBI or CIA deep state covert operations, unfortunately.
Yeah, so, I didn't know that about.
She's probably being groomed to be the next FBI director or something.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. I mean, this case is such. This trial, this case is a case study in and of itself about, I think, corruption at a global level and nepotism too, like you mentioned with Comey. Yeah. I did not know that about the tennis courts or the raising of the temple there. But that those rat lines, I think we've discussed before with Maxwell being a licensed, submarine operator in addition to being at least a helicopter pilot. I know. So many different modes of transport that she was able to do. But you mentioned the FBI agent Kelly McGuire testified to finding hard drives and other pieces of evidence. I think it was mostly hard drives at Epstein's 9 East 71st Manhattan townhouse. And already there was FBI evidence tags and stickers on the evidence. And she testified under oath she doesn't know how it got there before the FBI even raided that residence. So what was Epstein doing with hard drives that had already been processed by
they might have been hunters, so from China, because that's what the FBI does now. And again, graduated from the FBI Academy in 1990, friends with the FBI hero Ed Morales, a hero of the Miami FBI gunfight, but they're just filth now, and all they do is cover up, and it's real sad that that's where they have gotten to. But yeah, they covered up all that at the island because those were networks that were used, and so basically, Israel ran Ghislaine, although a real high-level informant like I have worked will work for anybody. And if you're not careful, they'll run you because they do this professionally. But the main theory that I have is that she was mainly working for Mossad, who was working for Israel, who had dirt on everybody. And the Israelis were doing letting them, do terrible things to underage girls so that they had leverage on all of these people. And then when Trump came in, that's when that got exposed because Israel didn't need leverage anymore because Trump was a friend of Israel. And now they need it again. So everything is shifting again. And I don't know if I've told you this before, but my intelligence said that there was an MI6 operative that came in through the vents and killed Epstein.
Yes, I recall that actually. Yeah, I do recall you telling me that. And, so several, I think, intelligence agencies that were a part of this. But I wanted to show this document. It's an FBI document. And highlighted here is, it says, quote, Epstein has also provided information to the FBI as agreed upon. This is back in the 2008 sweetheart deal time period. So it begs the question, what does that mean? What does that sentence mean? What kind of information was that referring to? Because that was a debate too that among Epstein researchers, was he an informant for the FBI? And that, I think strengthens the argument that perhaps he was, along with those FBI tags.
No, well, he either was a signed up informant. When you sign up an informant, you got to sign. They got to sign up. They got to sign for the money, or he did that in exchange for a plea deal. But obviously, the deep state reneged all that. But he might have had multiple deals that were happening and became just too much of a liability. But I don't think you're going to see that happen with Ghislaine because, again, I think that she was the handler for him, not the other way around, where I think most people look at it. But that's all you see now is with the FBI. But the good thing about this is in the fourth generation insurgent war that we are waging against our fifth generation enemies, our own government, China, transnational, non-state, super empowered individuals that run Facebook and Twitter and all those kind of things, is that the FBI is really becoming, they're so clumsy at this point and inept and corrupt, that they just keep falling all over themselves. And that's why you got to shut this down. They're shutting this trial down so that they can control it. Whereas in Kenosha, it wasn't a federal trial and they didn't have a lot of control over it. And so the prosecutors did stupid things like pointing ARs at the jury and, ridiculous. So as they winnow themselves out, they are only left with the most corrupt and the most incompetent, and they're losing ground. They're losing human terrain every day.
I hope you're right, sir. I think you're right. And I wanted to ask, beyond this trial, which might wrap up today, but it's looking like as the day goes on here, it's going to be into the new year, which again is surprising because initially we heard 6 weeks, and then it was like the prosecution rested after 2 weeks. Everybody's rushing in. All the people who haven't been showing up every day, like myself and a few others, they all came back. And then the defense rested after 2 days. So we're like, oh, this could be done by Christmas. But now it's almost like it's like you mentioned, the psychological war they're playing, like a war of attrition, just getting reporters to drop out and people to stop paying attention. But after this, whatever the conclusion is, do you see them going further into this, either up the chain or down the chain, in terms of this pyramid, this enterprise that it was formerly in power for about 30 years?
No, I think this will be the end of it. And they're reestablishing all of their drug trafficking and sex trafficking and child trafficking networks. In my day, if you were homosexual or if you were having an affair, that would be a problem because you could be blackmailed. And today, you got Obama and Biden groping kids on video, and our former police chief here just became the head of Border Patrol, Magnus, the activist homosexual, and so that none of that applies anymore. So no, I think they'll wall this off at this point, and it's over, and they're moving on.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Kyle trial, which we definitely I wanted to cover with you. You called him the Kenosha Kid. What was your assessment of that whole thing? That was a trial I largely tuned out of, but I just kind of watched it from afar. But yeah, what was your take on that whole saga, which seems to be wrapped up, at least legally so right now?
Well, I did a couple shows on that, and one of them is I said he beat them all. And there were songs about him. And the cool thing is that this young 17-year-old guileless kid who was a lifeguard and cleaning off graffiti during the day and then going in to provide aid to both sides was able to defeat everybody, not just the convicted child molester and wife beater that were trying to kill him. And tactically, his kill ratio is 2-to-1, which is good. His wound ratio is 3-to-1, which is good. But then what's really important is in the trial is the FBI shows up with overhead drone FLIR, forward-looking infrared radar footage, where they are marking everybody. And then there's also ground footage of an FBI agent running behind the two guys who are trying to kill him. And so what that tells me is, like I've talked about on other Blantifa covert operations, is this was another FBI-run operation. So I just did a show saying, did the FBI actually attack the U.S. Marshals? Because I have the U.S. Marshals is the oldest and last standing of the federal agencies. They were getting blinded. So I reached out to my Marshals contacts and said, hey, you guys need to get these anti-laser glasses. And they're like, why don't I have these? Why haven't I seen these? I'm like, because you're working for the G. And so they got them. And so, because a couple Marshals got blinded. And of course, they're throwing fifth generation warfare, which is non-kinetic. It's, in fifth generation warfare, you're not allowed to use, tanks, guns, but fireworks, bags of poop and pee, anything like that. Milkshake with concrete in them. All of that is fine. So the question becomes, since the FBI was behind the two attackers of Kyle, and we also know that an FBI agent brought two AK-47 bearing ISIS terrorists to a McFarland, Texas Draw Mohammed event, but a sharp Texas cop dropped both of them with his handgun, then what else is the FBI behind? And of course, the answer to that is January 6th, and also the Whitmer Wolverine, kidnapping thing. And all of this is collapsing. So that's why you're going to see it all delayed. I would imagine your trial will wrap up on a Friday afternoon or something, so that it's a slow news cycle.
Sure. That's I think not a bad estimation there. I think you're the only other person besides myself, and I think George Webb, who thought that the Rittenhouse thing was intelligence operation. And I say that with evidence that I think bolsters that argument outside of what you just said. I actually didn't know that about the FBI, but it only solidifies it more for me. And the reason I say this is because I think it was actually Kriston T. Harris from the Rundown Live who actually got subpoenaed in court as he was covering the trial, because he got a lot of the footage from that night. And there was a video, and I remember seeing it, and it was some of the protesters that were part of the group that Kyle was with. They said that police told them they were going to push, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, protesters towards them. And it sounds like, according to Kriston, they created kind of a pressure cooker whereby it increased the likelihood of violent physical confrontation to happen. And that video, I lost it, but I remember seeing it in my head. And then one guy I've interviewed a few times, Chris Hunter, sent it to me again. And I was like, oh, that's the video. And it was that piece of evidence that I was like, I think there's something deeper going on. I don't think Kyle is in the wrong. I think those criminals are still criminal, but those were the pawns on the chessboard. I think there was a lot more going on there that a lot of people didn't realize. I was just glad to see him get acquitted, for his own sake.
Yeah, George and Chris are both sharp. But the important thing to understand there is with the entire, and also when they say they're FBI, I mean, if you get to see the movie Spartan, you'll see maybe they're FBI. The CIA can get anybody's real credentials. The CIA used to like to use DEA credentials overseas because we actually carried guns overseas. So then a CIA agent could carry DEA credentials and carry a gun overseas, which made things safer for them. So just because they say they're FBI, they could be CIA. FBI, FCI, Foreign Counterintelligence Program, is actually CIA as well. But the important thing about the Kenosha trial was, with the entire deep state, CIA, FBI, overhead drone surveillance with forward-looking infrared radar, that he was able to beat that in a feral city. And a feral city is the SOCOM term for a city that's been taken over by the enemy, by terrorists. And that just shows how vulnerable they really are. So that was a real big inflection point for me in the fourth generation insurgent war that we are in against our own government and an array of state and non-state enemies. Very significant. And then that ties into January 6th as well. And, if people don't know, officers or leaders, whether they're non-commissioned officers or officers, generally don't go forward of the line. They're right behind the line of their troops so that they can guide them, and they move between them to push this one, pull that one. Like when I'm on the range and teaching moving and shooting, we're pulling and pushing to keep everybody because the range is moving. But that's typically where a leader is. And so that fits exactly where the FBI agent, the tactical agent handler, switching to intelligence terms, was behind the two killers that were coming after Kyle. And then the same thing is with January 6th, where they're opening the gates and waving them in. They're all masked up in Capitol Police uniforms. I don't for a second think those were Capitol Police. Just like I don't think for a second the SWAT guys on the other side of when Michael Byrd assassinates Ashley Babbitt, that those guys were actually SWAT guys. Those are whomever, because they're all geared up. That's why the masks all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another factor or a characteristic of this whole COVID situation that has really made covert operations that much easier. What was the origin of your intel on the FBI's participation in Rittenhouse? Was that did that? I'm guessing that didn't come up in court.
Never give away sources and methods.
I understand, sir. I had to ask. It's my duty.
Sure.
That's great though, because it really provides vindication for that video that I saw, and my inclination that was in fact there was intelligence behind it. It's amazing you say that it's almost like the CIA is like this ghost, or like a like arboreal entity that they can just put on cloaks and capes and masks of whatever they want and just blend in, anywhere. They have that legal or maybe illegal non-accountability to anything. It's quite
It's
amazing.
really extra legal. And that's the problem with them is after, the OSS in World War II is disbanded, two things coming out of that: Special Forces, Army Green Berets, and CIA. And Army Green Berets usually fabulous, and then CIA just a mess from the beginning because it's extra legal. And then kind of where I cut my teeth, which was working with the Contras, and when Ollie North does the illegal operation for Reagan to fund the Contras when it's illegal. So you get Contras, cocaine, and cash going to Mena, Arkansas, which, by the way, there's still lots of stuff happening there because it's a CIA facility. And then they figure out, well, we can fund all our black ops independently. Before that, funds had to be earmarked, and they didn't let the amounts come out because you can identify what they're buying by the amounts if you do good analysis. And so they're like, well, we can just fund our own drugs, arms, operations. CIA sends crack into black inner city ghettos as well, and that's never really ceased since then, except for Trump. Trump did a lot of great pushback on that when he got Mexico to put troops on the Mexican-Guatemalan border, which I've worked and said, hey, you can either get U.S. dollars, legitimate U.S. dollars, or you can do narco dollars. And they had chosen They had chosen, U.S. legitimate dollars, and of course the economy was great and everything. And now we're even worse off than we were before.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about the CIA. I'm not sure if you're familiar with. I think his name is Jeffrey Sterling case, but he's an officer that was working on Operation Merlin, which was this counter-espionage operation against the Iranians to feed them faulty nuclear intelligence because of their nuclear program. It ended up failing, and Sterling found I'm paraphrasing in his own words, that he was discriminated against. He thought based on his race.
He's black, right?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, do you think the CIA is racist, or do they have a racial supremacy a bend to them, or what do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what, Addie, you give me so much hope for the younger generation that you're so sharp and on your. So Sterling was a black case officer. So in the Army, it's all about the infantry. In the Air Force, it's all about the pilots. In the CIA, it's all about the case officers. And then everything coalesces around each one of those to support that. In the Navy, it's the captains. So Sterling was a black case officer who was working a counter or a sabotage operation, covert sabotage operation for the Iranian nuclear program. And he outed, I believe, the CIA, if I recall correctly. This has been years. And then he was actually charged and convicted by Holder, the black attorney general, who also came after me. Holder came after me trying to say I was a cult leader for my Christ Connection chaplaincy. Have I got that right? Because it's been a long time.
I think you're right. I think was that Mukasey who was at your time, or was that not the same period for the?
No, that was Holder.
Oh, it was Holder. Okay.
Yeah. And so the funny thing is, Holder, who called himself a black activist first before Attorney General, actually charged and convicted a black CIA officer. And so is the CIA racist? I guess to answer your question is, well, all the leftist organizations are really racist because all the communist organizations are really racist. If you look what Che Guevara said about blacks, if you look at what Margaret Sanger said that we got to kill black babies, because they're elitist. Even though there's that ridiculous commercial out now where there's the trans, bi, black, whatever CIA worker.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
They've become like a caricature of themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
Bizarre stuff there. But what is algorithmitage, Major Prather?
So, well, armitage is, of course, destroying companies. Algorithmitage is playing with numbers. So, for example, the S&P 500 wants to keep a certain level to make sure they look good. So if one of the companies, the 500 companies fall below that, then they remove them. So what happened with COVID very early on, because it came out of Wuhan, George Webb did a great job on that. I talked about that in less detail, Dietrich to Harvard to Canada, and also maybe the military games as well. But they still can't isolate the original aspect of it, but they can have all of these jabs, which are not vaccines because they had to change the difference of the definition of vaccines. Well, they changed the numbers because all the doctors were getting paid off. So that's why you saw GSWs, gunshot wounds, and car accidents. They were dying of COVID because they got money for that. So they changed all the numbers. The VAERS reports changed. So all of the statistics that was developing through big data, big data became a new fifth generation weapon that we had never seen before, because everything came through these devices, cell phones, laptops, and controlled means. Just like with the three networks, you could control the false flag about the Tonkin Gulf War because there were three main networks. Well, now you can control it. There's lots of more networks, and that's why your show and my show is so important, because they're alternatives. But when you can control big data, and we're still in the infancy of big data and big media and the manipulation thereof, although we are the product, but then you can just manipulate and change it to whatever you want. And that's what they have done. That's like what Obama did with his presidential library. He digitized everything. So he could change everything, just like with the digital birth certificate. So that's what that refers to.
That reminds me, I thought it was, I can't remember if it was the Digital National Library of Congress or what, but there was like a warning. I think it was on the Constitution itself, or or maybe it was the Declaration. I can't remember the exact context of that earlier this year. But speaking of that, are you still on YouTube? I don't know if you got your channel back because you lost it.
I did. They reposted me. I'm very good at dodging and weaving, and understanding the difference between concealment and cover. I've been taken down several times, but right now they have reposted me because, and I think, people, well, are you deep state? Well, just look at the way I've been attacked. But, I use particular terms, and I've played a lot around that, like I'll say the bioweapon, or for a while I was saying Charlie 19, or just using things that I'm looking just to avoid their keywords and their search terms, because I certainly know, how they'll scrape for all that stuff.
Right.
So right now I'm up. And again, that's what you do in insurgency warfare. You arm yourself with the enemy's arms. And so that's why I'm still on Facebook, still on Twitter, and still on YouTube. I got several channels. I think I talked to you about that one time. You said you got several channels.
Yeah.
I'm still up. I think all three of my channels are up. And the reason I like it is because I can live stream and I can see what the listeners are saying, and I can answer those every once in a while. I like to have the two-way dialogue, whether I'm in the dojo or the range or the chaplaincy. The two-way dialogue is very, very important for development and communication.
Definitely. I think it's essential to the learning process to have that feedback loop. And if you don't have that, it's, you know, you can still improve, but it makes it extremely laborious because you don't know what's what, right? So that's great. You got it back. You're motivating me to try to get my big channel back that got whacked over almost a year ago now. Actually, a year ago next week. So maybe I'll try to get that channel back. But just looking back on this year, you know, I was wanted to bring up Scheller too. He recently posted on his Facebook that the several peers of his officers, or either above or at his level or near it, basically ratted him out or even fished for intelligence via text around the time he was getting discharged and investigated. But what are some high points you saw this year in the informational war? And I wanted to ask about, you know, journalism, independent intelligence work as well, because it's amazing how it's evolved over the past, you know, few years, and it's always evolving and changing. Partially because we, like you mentioned, we have to kind of dodge and weave and jab a bit here. Yeah, so you know, kind of high points, maybe some low points, and then where you see this evolution that we're on with this media and this information. Where do you see it going?
Well, you know, Scheller, Colonel Scheller, honorable Marine. I don't think he read the battlefield very well. Just like I criticize Ali North for trying to run a illegal covert operation. I never did any illegal covert operations. I still never advocate anything illegal, immoral, unethical, or violent, although the left does that all the time. And we do have a right to defend ourselves. But you got to understand the battlefield you're on. So, you know, at the beginning of my show, I know you love it when I say we beat you know, the Nazis and the Japanese. But I also say that we lost a fifth generational war in 2020 to China and to a bunch of traitors and non-state super-empowered entities that control transnational markets, you know, Facebook and, you know, Facebook from Log Life, from DARPA, from CIA, from DARPA, DARPA, CIA, Log Life, Facebook, there. And then, you know, Zucker or whatever his name is as the face of that. But again, that's not the guy. That's a puppet or a double in front of what's going on. But while our government lost that war, which is why we left Americans in Afghanistan and we're important enemies, and we're trying to say men are women and the women dressed as men are molesting children, and we're firing cops and releasing prisoners, because a fifth generation war is to change the culture, to reverse all of that, because those are tenets of progressivism, which moves to socialism, which moves to communism, which moves to tyranny. But we certainly did not lose a war with the American people. If anything, the American people are energized much more so than that. The metrosexual coasts have fallen, although you can argue that even California is fighting back as well. But the terrain that they hold is scarce. They have to have barricades up, and the human terrain that they have is even less. So I see a lot of hope. I'm always hopeful. I'm always faithful that we will win this, but it's not going to be easy, and it could take decades and centuries. So that's, you know, my assessment of what's happening, that we are beginning to win because they are beginning to lose. And where are they losing? Well, Biden, publicly they say Biden's at 36%. It's probably really 26 or 16%, and those guys are probably paid, you know, because I don't believe in the polls for a second. The Kenosha trial key, the January 6th thing has fallen apart. They're trying to starve those guys, torture them, kill them. They won't be able to do that. They're not going to be able to get rid of those guys. Sandman and Rittenhouse are just getting started. You know, Rittenhouse was just here in Phoenix speaking. January 6th guys are not going to go away. So really this is the blooding of the new resistance in this war. And if you have seen Dunkirk or know Dunkirk is the Brits are overwhelmed, and all they do is escape. All they do is survive because the civilians bring out their boats to get them off. And so that always happens. It's just like what happened with us with the Japanese. The Japanese were kicking our ass across the Pacific because nobody is prepared because we're trying to, work and raise our families and make a living. But now this bloodying is happening where Sandman and Rittenhouse and the January 6th Patriots and Martyrs are just getting started. And this is going to be a huge problem for the deep state. As more die from the jab, as more are disillusioned from that, all of that is going to make this even more difficult for all of them to do anything. So the government lost in 2020, and we have been steadily gaining ground in 2021, and we will gain more ground. But to the second part of your question about journalism, the problem with the journalism is that it's just journalism. And so whether it's, my friend and former Green Beret Michael Yon or George or whoever, it's like, well, here I'm just present, or Andy Nago, if I'm saying his last name right, is, well, I just present the stuff. I don't do anything with it. And so that's not what journalism is anymore. Journalism on the left is an information influence operation for psychological operations for control. So you can't just say, well, I'm just going to do old school journalism, because that's not the way it is. It has to be made actionable intelligence. So that's where Team America and Team Global Freedom come in. I've been explaining things to people for quite some time, and now I hear people saying OSINT, open source intelligence. I hear Mike Adams saying that. I heard Biden say inflection point. I hear all my stuff being put out there so that people are getting a grasp of what's going on, but you have to then do something about it. And that's what Team America and Team Global Freedom, Team America has over 5,000 members in 41 states are organized. Team Global Freedom has over 15 countries. The total number is like 40 or 50,000. Some of my cast are 240,000 people, although typically it's like 3 to 11,000 watching one. But then what are you going to do with that? And so my point about that is you have to work behind the scenes, undercover, to tip the balance of an inflection point. Not just say, well, here's the stuff, because everybody's too used to being passive. And the good thing is I was on American Media Periscope, who likes to have me on, and the new young guy that was on there liked my stuff so much, he said, hey, I joined Team America. I'm like, well, great. So that's where things are starting to happen, is people are going to start to actualize that. And what I mean exactly by that is, for example, here in Phoenix, the Maricopa Patriots have done a fantastic job with the audit. But, and I'm not knocking it at all, I had Team America guys working that up. I've worked behind the scenes with them on that. But it gets to the AG, who is paid off by Soros, and everything stops. Same thing's happening in Wisconsin, because we're fighting on their battlefield where they have infiltrated and controlled everything. So we've slowly got to infiltrate undercover and take areas, low-hanging fruit, where we can tip the balance of the inflection point back and begin to take things back. That is, for example, what happened in Kenosha. Does that all make sense?
Yes, it does. Major Prather. It's something I have struggled with a bit too, is describing what exactly I do, and the negative connotation that journalism has. But yeah, it's looking at, I think, it in the lens or the viewpoint of informational warfare is the most useful, applicable, and I think logical. It makes the most sense when you see what these big outlets have been doing for years now with their pretty much purely propaganda that they've been spewing out. So yeah, I'm excited to see where things go. And I do want to get in touch with your Carolina guys as far or gals, whoever's running the show for Team America down there, because I am looking. I'm not gonna lie, folks. I'm itching to get out of the rotten apple, as my friend Wes once called it. It's not a place it's an interesting city to visit, but I'm here for work, and that's why I'm here. I one question: what is Log Life? Log Life you mentioned?
Log Life was the predecessor to Facebook. It was the
Okay.
CIA/DARPA. The day that Facebook started, Log Life went off.
Okay.
So, that's a mechanism for control, to monitor. That's what you see the FBI doing with all this as well.
Right. And then I wanted to ask just a couple minutes left here about the Mexican drug war. What if a reporter wanted to go and cover the drug war in Mexico? Because you've done work, I think, on both sides of the border in that theater. Any advice or counsel you could give to someone in that context?
Don't go. I've done a lot of dangerous things in my life. I've snuck into foreign countries, but working across the border, we weren't even allowed to carry guns back then, but we did after Camarena. And the thing was, don't get taken. But sometimes I'd be working with the federales and the judiciales and the bad guys. And when they took Kiki and tortured him. And by the way, there's a show called Narcos where it turns out that there was a CIA agent in the room when they were torturing an American CIA agent in the room while they were torturing Kiki to death. In those days, everything stopped. Jack Lawn shut the border down, and the inference was, if you kill one of us, you'll pay for it. Mm-hmm. And that's really important, that everything stops. And I knew Kiki's partner at the academy, that DEA agents went into a Mexican police station at gunpoint and took him out. And that's why I joined. Is like, wow, these guys are kick-ass, badass guys. They'll go into a foreign police station and save their guy. I can work with these guys, and that's what it was when I joined. But it changed, and so. But the inference today is, you can kill as many police or agents as you want, not just on foreign soil, but in America. You can leave American children in Afghanistan. It's all fine. So. There is no compunction now about torturing and killing Americans like there was. And the last time I checked, La Familia was the cartel that the Mexican government was enthralled to, like the U.S. government's enthralled to the Sinaloa cartel. La Familia is primarily a business-oriented cartel, not like the Zetas, cutting off heads and pulling guys apart and.
The New School Zetas are they control near the Texas border, and they're definitely, besides maybe Cartel Jalisco, the least respecting of human life, shall we say?
Yeah, but it's not a lot of skin off their nose these days, because there's no retribution coming at all. U.S. Border Patrol, again, I still have contacts with Border Patrol and BORTAC and BORSTAR because I was SNOWCAP, and they're not allowed to do anything. So, and I have been involved in child rescues out of Mexico. So
it's amazing what has gone on there the last 2 decades, really. I just hope they make some great movies out of it, if anything. I mean, this stuff you hear, it's like, I think it was in 2010, there was like a shootout at an airport. I can't remember which airport, but it was like some 100 federal officers, just an impromptu shootout. Some out-of-towners showed up. They tried to bribe them right away. They basically said no, and then somebody drew, and then it just popped off. And it's like, you couldn't even fathom that in the United States. Like, some hundreds or dozens of federal officers shooting out, like factions within technically the same team, right? And that's the thing too, is they don't trust anybody. They don't trust any of their coworkers because they can't. But
no, that was my problem. Is when I worked cross-border ops, I might be with the federales, but I had to watch the judiciales and the bad guys, and you never know, who was with that. That's why the Narcos thing, where they interviewed the guys the Mexican cops that took Kiki, and one of them is totally possessed, demon eaten. You can watch it, but it was just very, when I started watching it, my wife had me with me. I started crying because we think we have each other's backs, and although inside the intelligence community and special operations community, nobody has a lot of respect for the CIA. It's not the born guys. Those are ex-military assigned to or special operations intelligence folks. But it's real sad and real scary. So my best advice is don't go. But
okay, thank you, sir. That's I think that's heartening to hear, at least slightly encouraging to hear that in the intelligence community, the CIA is at least partially held in some contempt. It gives me a bit of hope.
Oh yeah. It's just like the FBI inside the law enforcement community. They're always making these movies about the FBI, but inside the law enforcement community, there's FBI agents who have never cuffed anybody, never done anything. I mean, they're not looked upon particularly. They're just always got a big rep. Yeah.
They're definitely on top of their propaganda. I think they still have an active TV show going on. I'm like, oh my goodness, who is watching this? But thank you, Major Prather, for joining me. Where do you want to send people to? Where do you want to direct people's attention? You've got several books out, which I've read. You got your show, which may or may not be on hiatus for holidays. But yeah, you're still on YouTube too, which is glad to hear that.
Yeah, well, all my stuff's at jeffreyprather.com, and yeah, I'm still doing my shows Tuesdays and Thursdays. I also do a live morning show on Brighteon TV on Friday mornings. And then I'm still teaching. Well, I haven't been teaching, but I'll start getting back to teaching. So if you still want to come out and do some training,
yes, sir.
George had a good time when he came out. He watched one of my firearms classes, I think, and thought it was pretty cool.
Definitely.
So good to see you. You're doing great work, and you're really, you got everything right. You're really on top of everything. So that's very hopeful for an older guy. That your generation is going to do the work to fix all this, that we've left you a mess. So well done.
Well, that's some high praise there, Major Prather. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I got to say, this work is really. I think I've talked to one person that's really been close to my age over the past 2 years doing this work. Other than that, it's been people usually not in my generation. But I don't mind it. I think older people are much better conversationalists and much more interesting than most young people, especially the high performing, pioneers too, avant-garde people like yourself, like Sibel Edmonds, like George, so many I could name, which I've listed in my book, some of them, Public Intelligence. But please go and sub to Major Prather. His Patreon has amazing intelligence. I've been a member of it on and off for the past 2 years. I highly recommend that. He's got different levels you can pick to support. And if you want to get involved with Team America, how can they do that? Also on jeffreyprather.com?
jeffreyprather.com. You can sign up right there, and then somebody will get back to you. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Major Prather. This will be available on Rockfin, which is where I'm sending people for videos now. And if you want to get on there, Major Prather, just let me know, and I can definitely refer you. It's an easy way to get tips and stuff. Very pro free speech, as well as anywhere podcasts can be found. Stay frosty, folks, and we will see everybody next time.